There we go. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Rangers Review Q&A show. As you can see, we're having a little play about with some intro videos that we've got just now, so you can let us know in the comments if you're a fan or not. Hopefully we've not burst your eardrums there, but we are on. And of course, this is the show that is run by you guys. We asked earlier to send the questions in, and you guys have delivered as always. We've got tons of questions to get through, and I'm not alone. It brings me great delight to say Jonny joins us once more. How's it going, Jonny?
Always a delight to be back, Derek, in the hot seat alongside you, talking rubbish and hopefully entertaining everyone with our hot takes. And let's be honest, there's plenty to give hot takes on right now.
There isn't. There is that. Not half. Yes, absolutely. Right, let's crack on because I'm conscious that so many of you have got in touch. So John Turner puts in, he fired in the first question, and it's something that I think we've overlooked with everything else that's going on at the moment. He says, hello, gents. It's probably not the best time to ask this given the absence of permanent leadership at the moment. However, is there any news or murmurings about a new academy director? This is such a key role at our club. Thank you. No replacement as yet for Zeb Jacobs, who departed, I think it was the tail end of April, beginning of May, if I'm not mistaken. He went over to Feyenoord back in the Netherlands. And at this moment in time, Rangers haven't filled that role, Jonny. I think there was I think the club were keen to find out, just to figure out what has to happen with regards to the youth academy and the best route forwards, but as such, there has been no replacement for Zeb Jacobs. Is this something that needs to be sorted out soon, do you reckon?
Well, see, to be honest, the way that it's going at the club at the moment, I think you're best to have someone come in at the top, the chairman, who appoints a CEO and who also appoints an academy director. I don't think there would be any point in making a finalised appointment right now, because all that does is it gives an academy director to a chairman that they potentially wouldn't want. So my understanding is at the moment that David McCallum, formerly of the B team, has stepped up to run the academy, and he's doing that in the meantime. And that's what the situation is there on a day-to-day basis. So there is someone overseeing things, someone with a really, really good knowledge of the inner workings of the academy and what's happening, and who the players are and who the families are, which is all imperative in terms of managing those different stages and ages correctly. And we'll see if that is something that Rangers want to pursue longer term, or if, I suppose, someone comes in with a new broom and says, no, we're wanting to try again. What I would say, Derek, is I was talking to someone in Scottish football today and just having a general chat, and they brought up about the academy and the poor return over the years. And, you look at Nathan Patterson bringing in 16.5 million. That looks like an aberration at the moment, Derek. There just isn't enough talent that's been coming through. I've had conversations with people who work at the academy, and they say that the next group that's coming through is going to be a really, really good one. You've got Alexander Smith, who's already been talked about, signed a new deal, very, very talented in there. But listen, I've been covering Rangers for quite a while, and there's always a sense of manana about the academy. I think tough questions need to be asked about the quantum that's been spent there. Do Rangers have to start thinking about the unthinkable, Derek? And this is not from conversations I've had with anyone in the club, by the way, before anyone says this. But if the academy is costing £2.5 to £3 million a year, maybe more, to run, does the question need to be begged over 10 years, 30 million war chest to spend on the best Scottish talent? Is that better or worse than bringing through your own that you don't use or that don't make it?
Yeah.
I think these are the sort of questions that have to be asked in a world where financial fair play is becoming more and more important in a European context, and having that money available to spend is imperative on that first team. Now, I don't think many people will agree with me on this, Derek, but you look at someone like Brentford who have gone down that road, and I think more and more big clubs, if they're not producing through the academy system, and if they can't find a solution to make it work, then you have to look at alternatives, because it's a big drain on resources. Now, I think personally I'd rather see the academy work. So that would be my first and foremost thing, Derek. But There's unique demands at Rangers, there's unique pressures. Players need to come out ready to play for Rangers. And if they can't do that, then why are you spending such a significant amount of money on trying to make it work?
Yeah, so, my issue, I mean, there's a lot of young lads on the fringes just now, but there's no one, a Barry Ferguson type or a Nathan Patterson, like you say, that comes through and can stake a claim and be a consistent performer. Now, no Rangers had an offer they couldn't refuse for Nathan. Whether he would have got game time with James Tavernier, he's been pretty much an ever-present at Rangers, so I think that was a good move all round. But I think you look at players that have came through the academy, very few have gone on and become key components of a Rangers team, which is my concern as well. It needs addressed. It's needed addressed now for some time. And
very few players actually go on and become key components in any team. Not enough. If you think back to the days of John Brown and people like that, the players like McDonald, Pizzo McDonald, what's his first name?
Peter McDonald.
Peter McDonald and players like that didn't quite make it at Rangers, still went on and had good careers in Scottish football. And you're just seeing less and less of that now, aren't you? I mean, Lewis Mayo won it. Kilmarnock done very well there. Not too many of them.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Let us know in the comments, folks, if there's more out there that are carving good careers elsewhere. I actually saw, was covering Barrow versus Bolton a couple of weeks ago, and Andy Dallas, who came through the academies, scored for Barrow. He's on loan from Barnsley, so he's another one that is forged a decent career down south, but few and far between. Let's move on. Next question from Darryl. He says, we saw Hamza Egeman get a 15-minute cameo at Parkhead, 30 minutes yesterday. Is it time to throw him in from the start? Already looks more mobile and technically sound than Dessers. Reminds me of a Morelos/Herrera situation. Will Clement put him in? I want to see him start against Dundee. No reason why he shouldn't, Johnny. I've been impressed with the glimpses we have seen from him. I thought he was good off the bench yesterday, some good touches, and he looks like there's a player in there. It was interesting hearing Clement speaking afterwards that they had to buy Hamza Egeman this summer because if they waited a year, they wouldn't be able to afford him.
Yeah. Also, finally, someone at Rangers admitting that he arrived injured.
Yes.
Which was a bit of a shock to hear the manager just come out and say that. We also suspect.
I don't know why he never came out with it at the start.
Yeah, it wasn't something that Rangers were prepared to say. I think Clement himself had actually had it put to him, is he injured? And he said, no, he's not. He's just not used to the demands of this level of football. Listen, one thing Clement did say was that he was seeing interesting things with Egeman and the ball. And we certainly saw that, didn't we, at Dundee United? His chest control was fantastic. His ability to turn in tight spaces, very, very good. And really, really exciting to see what a difference that could make to Rangers if that is the level that we're going to see week in, week out. He's a young player and saw his debut, full of excitement, etc., etc. But I thought it was pretty impressive, pretty exciting, and someone you would definitely want to see in the weeks ahead. Now, whether or not Clement will want to throw him in, I think he's a guy that really takes what the sports scientists say seriously. They might say, look, he's not ready for 90 minutes, maybe 45. It might be that they look to bring him in for that. Might be he gets another 35 minutes and then you're looking at a start. I don't know. But for me, if we're talking about just sheer performance levels, Derek, without knowing the data and the sports science elements behind it, absolutely, you pitch him straight in. I thought Cyril Dessers was absolutely appalling at the weekend. I mean,
got an assist though, Johnny.
He did, but I thought he was really, really poor at times. A couple of nice touches, there's no doubt about it. There's a couple of nice touches, a couple of nice movements, a couple of nice turns. But as I've said a million times, I don't want to go in two-footed for the 500th time on Cyril Dessers. But for me, it just doesn't hold the ball up well enough. So that's always an issue. And then what you get is you get the team struggling to kind of get up and around him. He looks isolated. So Egeman looked like he was a guy that was capable of doing that, and very exciting indeed.
Yes. Let's move on. Gary with the point says, do you think the club could be sold to become part of a football group like the City Group or the one the Chelsea owner is trying to create? Or do you think the SFA would block that kind of move?
Derek, just hold on a minute while I'm just being a little bit sick in my mouth here at the prospect of one of Scotland's biggest clubs becoming, one of these part of a group. Absolutely not. And I would be amazed if my sentiments just expressed there are not the sentiments from Rangers supporters and I think generally in Scottish football.
Yeah.
No, not for me. Not in the slightest, not even a little bit. No. Rangers are too big to be part of a football group. And I wouldn't want to see that. The only type of football group I would like to see Rangers part of, I think, would be one where they were at the head of it.
Yeah.
But not as a portion,
a feeder club. Yeah,
as a feeder club. Absolutely not. Yeah. That's just never going to get past.
Can you imagine
the fans?
Yeah. The fans would be having an uproar. Michael Gray with a point says, one thing I really want to understand, and my sense is Chris Jack will have insight into this, is what went so wrong at our club under the chairmanship of Douglas Park. I appreciate these things have to be discussed sensitively on Rangers Review, but it is clear from previous communication by King and Bennett, much of the blame lies with the Parks. What the hell happened is what he says. Dave King coming out, of course, Jonny. News broke late last night when he spoke to Chris about his want to return to Ibrox to replace John Bennett, who resigned over the weekend on health grounds. I had a dig. Well, he's been speaking also this morning on Talk Sport about the situation at Ibrox, and there'll be some supporters that will be pretty concerned about the behind-the-scenes goings-on with what Dave King has been saying. What do you make of this, though? Do you think it's time for a return for Dave King, John Gilligan in the helm and interim charge of the club? But is the time right for a return for King?
Well, the questioner said, there's got to be sensitivity, and I think there has to be, because these are all guys, if you're talking about Douglas Park, John Bennett, Dave King, who have put
a lot of money,
huge amounts of money into Rangers on the back of being fans without a lot of hope of massive return. I think if a Dave King or a Douglas Park was to get their money back, they would be amazed, given what's been put in. And Dave King's had his fingers burnt before when he invested 20 million under David Murray, 20 million pounds that he might have well set a light to for his chances of seeing that ever again. So when there's a sort of battle of egos going on, as there clearly has been between King and Park, it's not one you want to really take a side in. I think Dave King did some good things during his tenure, some very good things, not least, of course, going out and getting Steven Gerrard. That was a big gamble at the time.
Yeah.
And then obviously leading the club to a situation where it was able to go out there and win the 55th title on the back of what had been put in place under his stewardship. Mm-hmm. But then there was other problems, the battles with Mike Ashley, the contracts that have been ongoing until very recently, these problems with elite and things like that were problematic. But then no one goes through a period in charge of a club the size of Rangers without mistakes. But overall, I think one thing that Dave King is really, really good at is communicating clearly. He's always done that well, whether or not it was during his time at the club or since leaving. He's not shy in coming forward and telling you what he thinks, whether you'll like that or not. And I think in terms of the Park era, the Bennett era, they lacked a bit of that. I think Dave King was a guy who led from the front, who I think he had that in common with David Murray, someone who would understand the mood of the fans and come out and address the concerns. And while you might always not agree with what he had to say, he was out there saying it. And I think in some ways people found that quite calming. And I think that's something that's been absolutely missing since then. Now, Douglas Park's a more private person, didn't want to be a public face of Rangers. And certainly John Bennett's hardly done anything in terms of beyond the Rangers. He's not done any interviews beyond the Rangers TV stuff that he's done. And I think it would have been better for John if he had come out and done more with the media. I think that speaking directly to Rangers fans about the problems and the issues I think would have alleviated some of the anger and frustration that has been out there towards him. Now, he might in turn turn around and say, well, I did Rangers TV interviews, and every time I did them, there was a real backlash about something that I said or some other little thing that I said. And I take that on board. But I think if you're a more consistent communicator, if you're more trying to set the agenda rather than reacting, I think you've got a better chance. It's difficult no matter what you do, to be honest. A club like Rangers is never going to be plain sailing, and it hasn't been for them. But to get back to the initial question, because I've gone off on a long one, in terms of Dave King and what happened under the Parks, I think you've got to take what Dave King says about the Parks and vice versa with a pinch of salt. There's animosity there. There's dislike there. There's disagreement on how the club should have been run there. I think what John Bennett said when he came in was that he felt the club had kind of gone into a kind of stasis. Too many people, too long in the roles, had been around the club for a long time. You think about people like Ross Wilson, like Stuart Robertson, who'd been there for quite a long time. And I think John, when he came in, wanted to give the whole place a big shake. He talked about kicking the tires, having a look at what was happening. And there was a massive turnover, wasn't there? When Bisgrove came in as the CEO, he looked to really change things around. And I think that's reflective of maybe a sense that under Douglas Park that the club had maybe got a little bit stale in its sort of executive positions. But listen, sometimes you can have a stuffy administrator type that people go, "Why? What's that person doing?" and you don't realise what they were doing until they're gone. Like, I have to say, Stuart Robertson is not particularly popular amongst the support. He was a detail-orientated guy, an accountant by trade. And I don't think for a minute that Stuart Robertson would have allowed a situation whereby work would have started on a major project at Ibrox before all the materials were at Ibrox. Because he was a detail-orientated guy. He wasn't a big picture guy leading, the kind of the blue sky thinking, like maybe Bisgrove is. But he was a guy that dealt with the detail. And sometimes you need people like that around. And I think the club maybe have found that at their cost, to their cost, with what will have been an expensive situation in terms of hiring Hamden, all the extra costs that are sure to have built up over this longer term project than what it would have been had the steel been there on time. So listen, it's a difficult one. A lot of competing factors in the people that are running Rangers, and unless you're in there and you know exactly what's happening, it's difficult to pinpoint who's responsible for what. But there's no doubting, Derek, that overall the club is clearly not moving forward, because they're currently sitting without a CEO, a chairman, an academy director. It looks a bit of a mess from the outside looking in, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Incidentally, Ali McCoist on Talk Sport this morning says that a Dave King return would probably be the best option for Rangers. King himself, some key points that he said this morning on the radio station, says the club is in crisis. The extent of it, I don't know. Only those inside do know, but certainly the operational issues within Rangers are a challenge. I think something has to happen fairly quickly. The club lacks leadership in all aspects of the club. Clearly, we don't know all what's going on. But it's recruitment, it's on-field issues, it's off-field issues, and there are poor management issues. So that's what he had to say. You can go and watch the recorded news bulletin a little earlier on, folks, with the full quotes in there. So to go and give it a watch from what Dave King said a little earlier on. Moving on, the Scott McKenzie gets in touch. Afternoon, Scott. He says, just for a change of subject, I noticed yesterday when watching the league sleeve badges, it still said SPFL and did not mention the league sponsor. I thought that issue was over since Cinch ended their agreement with the SPFL. So do we know if there is any reason for this? I can't say I noticed it myself, Jonny. Is there still legal wranglings with Rangers and shirt sleeve sponsorships? I'm not aware of that until that was brought up there from Scott.
It's all gone very quiet on that front, Derek.
Yeah.
People are less keen to talk about it at the moment. I suspect something's going on in the background regarding this.
Yeah.
I don't think relationships have been fully mended, let's put it that way, between the club and the SPFL. But we will see how long that continues once there is a complete new broom at the club. This is the thing about the current situation with an interim chairman and no CEO. Everything could change in terms of strategy going forward. We have an inkling of what the strategy was previously under Bennett, and certainly extending back further than before his time with regards to SPFL. But now everything's up in the air. It's like the table that you were playing chess on has been flipped, and all the pieces have landed on the floor, and you don't know how they're going to be reconfigured on that table when things are tidied up. So until that happens, I don't have an inkling on the cinch thing. But people have been asked about it. And things are very quiet, put it that way. So I don't think there's an appetite to discuss it.
Yeah. Gary with an on-field question. He says, against Celtic, Kyiv, Dundee United, we started the games brilliant and played some great football for the first 10 minutes. Is it not concerning? We kind of fold after 10 minutes and you can see us playing something good for 90 minutes before November, like Clement says. That is when the team should be ready and playing good football. I'm genuinely one of the most optimistic Rangers fans out there and always find the positives, but no, not going to lie, I've been struggling in this season to put a positive spin on our performances, but I will keep trying and hope Clement has got a plan to get us challenging for the domestic honours and hopefully pick some results up in Europe. Huge sentence there from Gary, but the gist of it is Rangers starting well in these games, not putting teams to bed, as was the case yesterday, Jonny. That is something they're going to have to start doing because it was a nervy ending. Even though Rangers were comfortable in the end, you want to put teams to bed when you're on top.
Absolutely, and that's been an issue for how long, Derek? Yeah. I mean, even in the Morelos era, in domestic football, Rangers were lacking a cutting edge.
Yeah.
The one thing that they had when Steven Gerrard was here was they had Jermaine Defoe, who would very much give you that cutting edge. But since him, you know, it's always been a struggle. I think, Derek, you were a fan of Antonio Cholak in terms of a guy who, when you gave him a chance, was pretty ruthless. I would agree with that. I had issues around his general mobility and link-up play. But in terms of a fox in the box, he was the one player I think you could maybe look at and say was slightly unlucky at being moved out. But at the time, I'm not sure he was a good fit for what Michael Beale was trying to do. Fashion Sakala, another one who gave you output, but £4 million offer. I think that was a really good offer for Fashion Sakala, and I can understand why the club took it. Other than that, Cyril Dessers, I know that people will point to the goals from last season, but I just don't think he's prolific enough. I think he misses too many chances. And Rangers just don't have enough goals outside of Cyril Dessers. And that's been a long-term issue. You need Czerny this season to start putting the ball in the back of the net with regularity. I think he needs to have a sort of 15-goal season for that to be a success, 12 to 15 goals. And then if we're talking about on the other side, someone like Rabi Matondo and Cortez both also need to get similar amounts. I don't think Rabi Matondo is going to give you that. No. Cortez is just a young lad, but if Rangers have a successful time, they need goals from somewhere. You look at the midfield, Derek, is there a lot of goals in there?
That's something that Rangers have struggled with. Midfielders that score goals for some time.
But Bajrami's got to be that guy, hasn't he? And you know, in terms of the expectation, I mean, it's one more reason why I find the whole situation around Yanis Hadji really hard to fathom. Because here's a guy, and I know these issues around his contract, and I know these issues around the money that's probably due to Genk.
Yeah.
What I would say is there's a guy that we know is capable of giving you 20 to 25 goal contributions in a season when he's right. And I would have liked to have seen Yanis Hadji integrated. I think he would add a lot to this squad. I think you just... For me, I think you need to bite the bullet on that and try and do some sort of deal to get him back playing. I know the club will say there's reasons why, but
yeah,
I don't
think
you're
reasons why. But yeah,
you're not going to be able to get the best value out of a player like that if he's not playing for the next 6 months, are you? because it's
no.
going to be a loan move in January or a cut price deal in January just to get him off the books. I don't think that works for anyone.
I think we'd all be happier if we had Yanis Hadji starting yesterday rather than Kieran Dill. Put that to you. I don't think I fail to see what the manager sees in Dill. Now, I understand that McCausland picked up a knock in international duty and Tierney was ill. But I'd much rather have Hadji as an option as opposed to Kieran Dill, I've got to say. It's a waste. Rangers, of course, paying his wages at this moment in time anyway. But he's not part of Clement's plans. He said it and he's been steadfast in it every time he's been asked. Seems to be every press conference at this moment in time. There's no change in that situation. So he is not being considered for the first team. Martin Ferguson just says, wish all the best to John Bennett, a proper Rangers man. I think we need stability now. So Dave King would be the ideal man to take over and ultimately find proper investment for the club. Kev Miller says, just racing on a point that Dave King said to Chris last night. Saudi USA investors need significant return on the investment. We're trying to break even. How does this add up? It's interesting saying there was... It was interesting. King said there was interest. Different markets, Rangers will have to look for investment, but it's a good point there from Kev. But I think the point about supporters putting money in, a la John Bennett, Dave King and the likes, not expecting anyway a return of any way, shape or form. I think Rangers need to move on from that, and they do need to bring in funds from elsewhere. Scott Girvin would like to see Dave King return. My question is this potential return of King an opportunity to attract substantial investment whilst also maintaining the core values of the club? He told us in the way out last time that it was now up to us. Well, we certainly did that. Who is it on us on now?
On that investment.
Yes.
I think people have to be really, really, really careful what they wish for on this front. No investor comes in just offering a big wad of cash and not expecting anything in return unless they're a fan.
Yes.
And if you're talking about that kind of emotional investment, I don't have a problem with it at all. Where I start to have serious concerns is in what I would call the VC venture capitalist model, where you're going to America and you're going to Saudi is a slightly different model because they're looking for, I think primarily political influence through investment. But if you're looking at the venture capital of America, I mean, Americans are taking on these sports franchises because they see a weakness in terms of management and emotion in terms of the way these clubs are managed. And they think if they can apply American business principles and listen, I could talk for hours about how American sport has always been a business, whereas we've kind of, in the UK, adopted a more Corinthian spirit approach to sport. And if you look at the NFL, for example, no relegation, no promotion, Derek, a closed shop. Why is that? Because you've got fixed costs. You can manage the business 10 years ahead. It's not this business like Rangers, like, do we budget for the Champions League? Don't we budget for the Champions League? Do we budget for first? Do we budget for second? Do we budget for the Europa League? It's all fixed because they're business orientated. And sport was always business orientated. Whereas in the UK, we have a culture of sporting excellence. So, if you're good enough, you can rise from the very bottom. I'd say in Scottish football, like a Gretna did to the top league. And in England, we've seen the same, and we're going to see the same now with Wrexham. They can rise and become a super club, and look at the romance of that on the way. And of course, it's not really romantic at all, but it's selling the PR dream of the two Hollywood stars that are going to make a killing, no doubt, on this deal down the line. So I'd just be really wary of being of the mindset. Rangers are in a mess right now. They're going to come second. They're probably going to have a really tough time in Europe. We must bring in 40 or 50 million quid to invest in the team.
Anywhere. Yeah, I know.
Because we've seen what 40 or 50 million pounds spent badly can do. I mean, that's what's happened over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
What have Rangers had to show for the last four or five transfer windows, and how much overall has been spent? If you don't have the structure right to spend the money that you have, you're always going to be in trouble. And look, Ridvan Yilmaz cost £4 million or £3.5 million, right? That should be a guaranteed success in Scottish football, but he's had constant injury issues, so he's hardly played. And Aaron Ramsey should have come to Scottish football and tore it up, but he didn't, because he had constant injury issues and he could never get fit. And we know what happened from there on. And I could go on and on about the money Rangers have spent and the players they've brought in, and why so many of them just haven't worked. And look at Danilo, £6 million. A huge investment. Yeah. And the first time I looked at him, Derek, I thought, £6 million on a guy that's that slight. Now, he better be a baller beyond belief.
Well, he was a squad player at Ajax and Feyenoord. He wasn't the main man. He came off the bench and contributed, which at 3 million, perhaps 6 million is overspending. There's no doubt about it.
And then going and having a look at Cyril Dessers, and again, the price of Cyril Dessers was anywhere between 5 and 6.5 million, depending on who you believe. So it's not like Rangers haven't gone out and spent money. So what I'm saying is, just be wary of the idea that money equals a turnaround and success. It might not if you don't spend it well. One thing I would give credit to John Bennett for is being really fastidious about this idea of, right, no, we need to go down a different transfer model. We need to go and get younger players in. Even, the spend on Proper, I think it was about 1.5 million. You're getting the captain of a Dutch Champions League qualifying team.
That's
not a lot of money. But in terms of you do need a bit of experience. But in terms of the others, if you look at Rangers' squad now, right, if you actually think about it, there's quite a lot of value there, and there's a lot of players that are on the up.
Yeah.
You think of Yilmaz if he can stay fit. You think of Cortez. You think of Igman, Jeffy, Diamande, Raskin, Barron. There's actually quite a lot of decent young talent. And they are the kind of players that can develop over 2 or 3 seasons and then be sold on. And it's the first transfer window in a while Rangers have actually gone out and got that kind of player. You think back to the signings of Tom Lawrence, and that was Ben Davies. That was kind of going out and trying to get ready-made guys, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Ross Wilson was expensive.
Yeah, Ross Wilson was at the helm. I think he was a key factor in that window until he left for Nottingham Forest. But let's move on to the next question. Ringa31 says, is PC pre-match interviews getting people down as much as I feel it does? Sounds more like making excuses before the game rather than motivating people. Example, pre-match against Celtic, I was feeling the battle fever nerves and excitement. PC does his interview about new players for us, tried and tested team for them. Yes, that's true, but we all know that without him reminding us 60 minutes before kickoff, the player's getting the same vibes he's giving me. I've seen some on social media criticising the manager and coming out in some of his press conferences saying it's boring and what have you, Jonny, which I can understand that the team are not in a good bit of form. No, they won yesterday, but in the main that they are struggling. Philippe Clement, though, is he someone that you would imagine players would run through brick walls for, or is his demeanour in interviews, do you think that relays onto the team? Do you think he's got a point there, the Ringa31?
Listen, do you know what? It's one of these things that, when you've got a calm manager, like, for example, Sven was in England. Remember Sven when he first arrived, 5-1 against Germany and Munich, and that. And they were all loving it. They were all like, "Look at this guy, so different to the English average." And then when things started to go wrong, they were all like, "Why is he not showing more passion?" It's one of those things where you can't really win. It's just his personality. So yeah, for me, I just think that is the way Philippe Clement is. He's quite balanced. He's always at that level. I've rarely seen him agitated. Very, very occasionally after the defeat, you'll see him slightly up. But most of the time, I think he's very much trying to keep it on the same plane.
Yeah.
And I think that's all it is.
Yeah.
But I understand his point, the point the guy's trying to make with that. But I just think it's the manager's personality.
Yeah. Question from Moshua. Back to the off-field stuff. He says, my main issue, this is on King, says, I'll do it for 2 years. How long must we accept short-termisms? Will this be 2 years of stability, then back to chaos and back to needing someone else to come and steady the ship? He interestingly says that he just wants to come back for 2 years, not 4 or 5, Johnny. I can understand the point there. Rangers need stability, don't they? They don't need the chairman changing every couple of years.
Yeah, but at the moment, there's been too many changes, isn't there? And the problem that you've got, and I think Dave King was absolutely spot on about this, okay? So at the moment, the club are saying, we're going to go and get someone, we're going to get headhunters on the go, they're going to go down and find a chairman, and they're going to find a CEO. And they'll find the best person in the market. So that's what a lot of fans have been calling for. Go and get the best in class. You talk about the best in class. Stop appointing from within the investor group. Go and get people who will unemotionally run this business.
Yes.
But Dave King's point is, they'll go and get somebody from London. We know the type of person that the headhunters like. It'll be a slick London professional who's a good communicator. But will they be used to Glasgow? Will they be used to dealing with the political atmosphere at the SFA, at the SPFL? Will they understand the idiosyncrasies of the Scottish attitudes towards Rangers based on many years of history that's gone on in the last 15 or so years? Will they grasp the size of the club in the first 6 months, or will they have to take time to adapt to it? And that's all those factors are factors after they found the person. And these guys take time. These headhunters, they're not like that. They go and they speak to people, they interview, they talk to them. Process. It takes time as a process. And I think Dave King's point was, look, I know it all. I've done it before, and I'm prepared to do it again. And I can start immediately. And it's not, none of it's new.
Yeah.
And I can kind of understand that because, so I'm kind of torn on it. But I would say overall, Derek, I would be with the board. I think, I'll tell you my own understanding. Commenters will have a different understanding. I don't expect Rangers to get anywhere near Celtic in the league this year. I don't expect them to have a European campaign of any note. I think it'll be painful. I don't think there'll be too many points gleaned. And I think what Rangers need desperately is a communicated plan. Someone who's going to come in and give the fans hope and say, this is where we're going, this is what we're going to do, and do it. And I think then you will get people on board and you'll start to get the feel-good factor coming back. But at the moment, I feel like the club is completely adrift. It's impossible to defend. I know there's circumstances. Certainly John Bennett is not well. He's doing this on doctor's orders. He didn't want to do this. So this is circumstances out with anyone's control. But at the same time, you know, to lose a chairman, to lose a CEO, to lose academy director,
it's not good, is it?
It's not good, and it's a snowball effect, and it's the implication of the chaos club. And Rangers need to go out and get people who know what to do, who've done it before, and they're steadying the ship and building for the future. And I don't know many Rangers fans, Derek, that feel like this is going to be a season of success and winning trophies. I just don't.
Transitional.
I think because that, if you're in the club, you need to use that as an opportunity to sell the longer term vision. There's not many seasons where you get an acceptance of the fan base. We understand it's a transition. We know that it's a young team. We know what the manager's trying to do. He's cut £10 million off the wage bill. He's hardly spent any money in the winter, in the summer window. Comparatively, you look at the amount that's gone out the other way. Big players as well, players that were able to leave for nothing, that were valuable to the club, and the manager's already put on record his feelings regarding that. And the club have put themselves in a position where they've allowed players like Lundstrom and Barisic to walk out for nothing. Now, I know there's a lot of people that didn't like those players, but the fact is they had value, Derek. They had
they
some
should have been
value.
sold before then.
The club should have worked a situation where they were getting the value back. You look at Celtic across the way, and they're getting £2.5 million for Mikey Johnson. I mean, that just puts everything into context about how far Rangers have got to go. And it's a mess, but there needs to be a plan that people can get behind and evidential, solid track records in the people we go and get. You know, people who have managed clubs at a high level.
Yeah.
You're still going to have issues. And I would not be in any way adverse to Dave King being a sounding board, of course, for a new CEO or new chairman, because he's been through it. It's the same with John Bennett. These guys need to offer that, and I'm sure they will. As you say, Derek, I think like it's a chairman coming in for 2 years. That seems to me just even more kind of short term.
Yeah,
I do get where King's coming from. I don't think it's invalid. But I think the club needs to make a stance now and move forward. It did that when Bisgrove came in, and it lasted a year. But it needs to be bigger than that and more solid than that.
Yeah. The difference between Celtic and Rangers is they have a player trading model, and Rangers want to have a player trading model. That's where we are at this moment in time. So, Edward, with the point, we'll get to we'll rattle through some of the questions on the side of my screen. Edward says, does the club need more change other than King upstairs? Yes, absolutely. There's change needed throughout. We touched on it at the start of the show with regards to the academy. I think that needs sorted out. Also, Stuart with the point, only person putting his hand up. So if not King, who? We need someone in to sort things out that should have been sorted out months ago. Yeah, absolutely. James with the point, do you think John Bennett was trying to do too much in running the club and should have had a stronger board and someone within the board able to take over from him? There should have been someone. I mean, we talked about James Bisgrove. He left in the summer a few months ago. Jonny, there should have been someone put in place. We know that Jim Gillespie, that move never materialised. It all looked like he would be taking over, but for whatever reason, that never happened. Rangers back to square one with regards to a CEO. John Bennett now resigning due to health grounds, doctor's orders. Perhaps just taking on too much. The stress and strain of being the Rangers chairman is a lot, does it not?
It certainly is. I think John Bennett took an enormous amount on his own shoulders. And in the absence of a CEO, he was acting as a de facto CEO and the chairman. He's not a young guy. He's in his 60s. He's retired from his profession. So he was getting to a stage in life where he was wanting to slow down. And he's probably come into Rangers and taken on more than he's taken on in decades in terms of the workload. And then you're talking about the public scrutiny and some of the vile stuff that's been written on social media platforms by people who are hot-tempered and not really thinking through the logical process of when you put something up and the effect it can have on people. People get upset, obviously. And in our game, Derek, it's easy to kind of brush it off because over the years, if you've been a journalist for a long time, you kind of get used to it. But that's nothing. That's nothing compared to what you would get as the public face of a club the size of Rangers, whenever something goes bad. And these are guys that have put millions of pounds in, and they're not used to that level of opprobrium. And I think it would be really, really challenging and difficult for anyone to suddenly come up against that level of animosity, especially from your own folk, as it were. And listen, some people will say, well, it's just words, it doesn't really matter. But we're talking about people's lives, and you have to know from someone who's been through the odd Twitter storm in my time, it ain't nice, and it can shake you, So, Derek, you've had the odd one too. You know what I'm talking about. It can be it can be tough. And
Yeah,
it can
even
be
yesterday,
questioning yourself.
absolutely bonkers stuff. Yeah, Twitter can be a cesspit at times. So you need a thick skin at times to deal with some of the stuff. But yeah, I can imagine it being a huge weight on his shoulders. So we just hope that it recovers back to full health, I guess. And I think it's probably a right move that he steps aside and for someone else to take on the responsibility moving forward. We'll move on because I'm conscious of time. Leesky says, good afternoon. Now the transfer window is complete. Can we evaluate how successful we have reduced the wage bill and a comparison to Celtic's wages? Well, you just touched on it there, Jonny. They did have to reduce the wage bill, which was John Bennett did say the operating loss was at £10.5 million. He said at the AGM that had to come down. The wages had to come down, and Rangers have reduced the wage bill. In comparison to Celtic, a quick check of Celtic's wage per year. I think it's just a little over £22 million. I don't know how Rangers.
No, Celtics is a lot bigger than that, mate. So I don't know if you're looking at like the half year or whatever, but there's a few complicating factors in that because I think Celtic release the first team wage or the football wage as part of it. They separate out where Rangers just release the total. So you can't actually fully tell if you're looking at the accounts. But listen, Rangers had a bigger wage bill than Celtic in the last set of accounts. I think it was £3 or £4 million more. How that transpired out, how it was taken apart, there isn't detail on that. But I understand that the playing budget was bigger than Celtic's. However, that won't be the case now. That absolutely won't be the case now. Rangers have taken at least £10 million out of the wage bill. John Lundstrom was on a very big salary. Connor Goldson was on a very big salary. I think Borna Barisic was on a good salary. Ryan Jack was on a good salary. I could go on and on about the players that have departed. So they've really, really taken a massive chunk out of the wage bill. And if you think about the kind of guys that they've brought in, someone like Robin Proper, I would imagine would be on something like half of what Connor Goldson was on. If you think about players like Igaman, he's not going to be on a big wage. And these are sensible things for Rangers to do, to look at how they can get better value. Fundamentally, when Connor Goldson came into the club, for example, I think he was on a wage that was high, that was good, but probably of a level of what he was delivering to the club at that time. But then you look at like 6 years on, much older, injuries, and he's actually on a higher wage than what he had when he came in, because he's had rises, or a rise, because he did 4 years and then he got a new contract for 4 years. So a club like Rangers has always got to be assessing whether or not the player's market value or his value to the squad, as it were, is reflected in the wage, and assessing that and whether or not they're putting that player available for transfer. But certainly the wage bill will now be below Celtic's. I mean, they've spent a good amount this summer. They've brought in players who will be on high wages. Adam Ida's not leaving Norwich to come to Celtic for anything less than 25,000. And then
Engels will be on big whack as well, you'd imagine.
Definitely.
So.
Yeah.
Interesting. Right. That'll do us there. Big thanks to Jonny as ever, and thank you to each and every one of you for your support to the channel, first of all, and for contributing to the Q&A show. It's always greatly appreciated. Steve-O says a 50-minute Q&A. Hope you have been paid overtime. Yeah, bumper show as expected. You always deliver when I put the request out for questions. Some interesting questions being put towards us. Yeah, Jonny?
We're being paid in hot air, so we're doing well so far.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll wrap up there, and I'm back on tomorrow, myself and Joshua on the morning briefing. We hope you can join us then. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Monday. Bye for now.